Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. One of the best definitions I've ever heard was from Brian Tracy. And Brian Tracy is a sales trainer. He's been around for dozens of years. And he said that successful people hate doing the same thing that unsuccessful people hate doing, but they do it anyway. And I thought about that many times over the years. I used to listen to Brian Tracy's tapes. Yes, I used to listen to tapes way back in the car when I used to go to the networking meetings. And I thought about it a lot because in these last 16 years that we've been running Psychotactics or the marketing business, there has been more resistance than I expected. Some days there is so much to do and there are so many things that sprout up everywhere that you just don't feel like doing anything. The resistance is much harder when I have to start up a project, like if I have to write a book on a specific topic, or I have to start up a course, I have to do some presentation. I would rather do anything else than handle that one thing. The resistance is so great. That's when I remember Brian Tracy's advice, which is that successful people do the hard work even though they don't want to do it. And this is what this resistance episode is all about. I think you'll really enjoy this episode on resistance, especially as we take on a brand new year. Hi, it's Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. A few weeks ago, I started writing, or rather rewriting, the article writing course, and I noticed something very interesting, and that is that I stopped sending out the postcards. Now, a postcard takes me just a few minutes in a day to send out, and then, of course, as I go on the walk, I will ship the postcard to whoever I'm shipping it to. But I stopped writing the postcard. And one day slipped into 2, and 2 days slipped into 4, and then before I knew it, 2 weeks were done. Finished. Never to be seen again. So what happened there? It's not like the postcards are not on the table. It's not like I can't write the postcard, but every time I see the postcard, I can't seem to get myself to write one. Why is that? It's a factor of resistance. And in today's episode, we're going to cover 3 elements of resistance, as always. The first thing we're going to look at is it resistance or is it something else? The second is why resistance detests groups. And the third is why scripting helps. Let's start off with the first one, which is it resistance? When we struggle to get something done, we think that we're dealing with resistance, and we're not. What we're dealing with is exhaustion. Think about the things that you have to do on a single project. Let's say you have to write a book. Now, what's involved in writing a book? You have planning, you have outlining, feedback, writing, editing, layout, graphics, illustrations, cover design, sales page, pre-sale, and then a whole bunch of things. And that is just the short list. Now, you look at that list for more than 20 seconds, and you feel your shoulders sagging. Your eyes glaze over. You just want to jump on Facebook. You want to eat ice cream. In short, you want a sugar rush. And Facebook will provide that sugar rush. Ice cream will do the same. But once that sugar rush is done, it's done. And then your fear magnifies tenfold. And this fear is often called resistance. But it's not always just resistance. More often it's just tiredness, and we know it's tiredness because you were easily able to update your Facebook posts. But having to write 5 or 10 pages of your book is quite something else. Now you need a truckload of energy to complete a task like writing. And then, even if you are able to complete the writing, there's still a ton of stuff to be done. And after a while, all of this stuff happening to you, you just stop fighting. Just getting from one part of the project to another is tiring. And that is provided you have nothing else to do in the day. No distractions, no phone calls, no mundane stuff to do around the house or the office. Nothing. If you were Queen Sheba with 20,000 attendants fawning over you, and you wanted to write a book, it would still be exhausting. So the key to understanding resistance is to avoid this long-lost cousin of his called exhaustion. And we know that it plays a bigger role because we don't start out being resistant. We start out wanting to conquer the world, and then something happens along the way. Well, not along the way, but shortly after. Exhaustion sets in, and as you'd expect, resistance moves in, like an 800-pound gorilla. By which time you give up. I remember attempting to write the Black Belt Presentations book series. As the title suggests, it was a series on presentations and how you do those presentations. Now, I didn't get stuck when I started. I didn't get stuck in the middle. I got stuck almost towards the end. I finished almost 2.5 books, which is about 85,000 words. And yeah, it shouldn't have been a problem for me because I'm used to writing books. But then I got tired, and then I got distracted, and then I shelved the entire project for weeks. And weeks turned into months and almost a year. But how do we know that exhaustion was the culprit? It's because I put the book away and I went on vacation. And when I came back from that break, in less than 2 weeks, I was able to complete the books, do the audiobook version, and do another 40 to 50 additional cartoons. Now, even that is a lot of stuff, but what I'm saying is that even when you have the capacity to do something and do it at high speed, suddenly you get this problem, and that is resistance, or what we call resistance, but is really exhaustion. We may be dealing with resistance if the task is very small, like, say, backing up your files or tidying your desk. That's resistance, all right. But when it comes to more complex tasks, it's a lack of competence to some level, and then that exhaustion that shows up, it chews up every single joule of energy. By the time resistance walks through the door, we're easy prey. So how do we get around to being more competent? If resistance is not the enemy and exhaustion is the enemy, then we have to figure out how do we get our energy back. And it's very easy for us to buy into a lot of stuff that's being said online and offline. And that is, work is your religion. Work is what you do. Work is what you love. But the point is that you have to have the energy to do that work. And we've been at Psychotactics and doing this stuff for quite a long time. And what I realized was that my output, my ability to create better work, not just more work, but better work, was going down. And the reason was I wasn't taking enough breaks. So you have breaks maybe every 25 minutes. I have software here that stops me every 25 minutes and I have to go and take a break. I take a break in the afternoon. After lunch, I will rest for at least 20 minutes, sometimes as long as an hour. And then there are weekend breaks. I used to work 2-3 hours on a Saturday and 2-3 hours on a Sunday. Now nothing. And then there is the 3-month vacation, which is why you're listening to this podcast. But the point is that even if you don't take all of those vacation breaks, you're still having to deal with this factor of exhaustion all the time. And if you don't take the breaks, say every 25 or 30 minutes, or you don't take a little nap in the afternoon, maybe just 20 minutes, what you will find is that your productivity is going down, but resistance now is coming back to you and hitting you in the face big time. So the first thing we have to understand about resistance is that it has its cousin, and that's the cousin that we have to deal with: exhaustion. So the quicker we can get our energy back, the quicker we can start to beat resistance, and the quicker we can bundle exhaustion out of the door. So that's the end of the first part. Let's go to the second part and find out why resistance loves the lonely. Resistance loves a loner because loners have limited energy. They start out on a project all excited with what's about to unfold, and then for some reason or the other, they lose their way. And that's when resistance gangs up on the loner big time. It's not much of a fight. The loner is already exhausted. One tiny tap on the head from resistance and the loner falls into a heap on the floor. But this miserably one-sided bout could be avoided with the understanding of group work. In Africa, there is a saying: if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go with a group. And resistance detests groups. And there are several reasons why a group helps you get a project done with far more efficiency and a lower failure rate. So, how do groups help? They help in 3 ways. The first is the release of pressure, the second is exponential learning, and the third is support. Let's look at all 3 one by one. So the first, which is release of pressure. So what's release of pressure? The toughest part of a project is dealing with the pressure. And a release of that pressure is needed to give you a breather. When you get upset and you're sitting by yourself, you just rant and you rave, and you do it alone, and it's very depressing. But when you're suffering alone, you think that it's something to do with you, with your talent, with your genes, and that you're useless. And having someone to just listen to your rant is amazing therapy. You rant, you've been heard, and now it's time to get back to work. And this is what a group does. They listen, and then they talk back, and then you realize, oh, it's not just me. So the group helps, and then resistance goes down because now you've had your say and the group has cheered you on and you're back to work. So that's the first thing. The second thing that a group does really well is exponential learning. Mistake making is frowned in our society. We love to get things right the first time. And yet all of us know that's completely impossible. It's impossible to learn without making a ton of mistakes on any project. And this is no matter how familiar we are with the project. The problem is that mistake making, instructive as it is also terribly depressing. It's frustrating. So when you're going around in concentric circles, your exhaustion is starting to build up rapidly. However, when you're in a group, you learn from someone else's mistakes. When a group shares its learning and mistakes, everyone learns. And everyone gets a little samba in their steps, because you're not just learning, you're learning exponentially. You're learning from 4 or 5 mistakes that the group is making every day. And guess what? Most of those mistakes aren't yours. And this takes us to the third factor of resistance with groups, and that is just of support. So this whole thing has been about support, the group. But resistance can take on a loner. It's just very hard for resistance to take on a group. If someone fails, there's usually someone else to pick you up. If someone is struggling, there's someone else to help. If someone has questions, there are answers to help you move along. Working by yourself, you not only miss the ongoing support, but the struggle wears you down, and inevitably you're going to give up. Now, this kind of group support doesn't necessarily work for all kinds of projects. Sometimes a project is just to clean your desk. You could do with all the ranting and raving and the group support, but it's an overkill. Besides, it probably takes under an hour to get even the messiest desk tidy. But if this seemingly mundane desk has to go over a long period of, say, 6 to 8 months, then probably you need the power of the group. At Psychotactics, group form a critical part of the whole project experience. So in every course, we have groups. If we just take the article writing course, for instance, there's 3 months of learning, there's implementation, and it's physically exhausting. If you were to try and replicate that same pace by yourself, it's probably easier to give up in a few weeks. But with a group, 75 to 80% make it to the finish line. When you consider the sheer intensity of the article writing course, you should have the figures the other way around. 75% should not make it to the end. And yet, it's the group that helps you through. But how do you work with projects where the group doesn't have a common goal? It's much harder to pull off a project when everyone is headed in different directions. When the African saying said you could go a lot further with a group, they were suggesting that the group had a common goal. And if everyone in the group isn't headed towards the same deadline or using the same tools, then they have little in common. Then it's relatively easier for the group to be counterproductive. As no one is learning from the group mistakes, and everyone has their own agenda. It's important for the group to set out on a common goal and at least have some common guidelines, so that even if you have 10 different writers writing 10 different types of books, they should meet online every day. They should post their learning for the day. They should write about 800 words. If they're a group that's working on a gardening project, then there needs to be the shared learning, the shared support moments, the shared implementation. But don't you need the right group for things to work? Yes, having the right group is important, but how do you choose that right group? Groups need to be chosen primarily on the basis of attitude, which is why, for instance, at Psychotactics, we call our courses the world's toughest courses. Now, what happens is this attitude weeds out the excuse makers. It ensures that you get the cream of the crop. You get people who are interested in succeeding. So it's less about where they're going and more about how their attitude towards a project is. Because just as you get a great group, you can also get a lousy group. And then whining and whinging and depression will be constant, and progress becomes impossible. So just having a group isn't enough. You need to put in some filters to ensure that at least 75% of your group is going to make it to the finish line. The one filter that you can have is attitude. When people enter with attitude, when they enter with goals, when they enter with tools, when they enter with not just enthusiasm, but specifics, then you know you've got people with the right attitude. Resistance likes this whole factor of namby-pamby groups. It likes to push the loner down and keep that loner down. And most projects are done by loners. That makes resistance very happy. Now it can take its little finger and push you over. And resistance then walks away happily. So we've just covered two things. First is this factor of exhaustion and how you need to control this exhaustion factor so that you're not beaten by resistance. The second thing was this whole thing about a group, and that if you're sitting by yourself, it's much harder to succeed. The third thing is a factor of scripting, and we'll look at why scripting helps. If you read Getting Things Done by David Allen, you may realize something very profound. He talks about how most people have to-do lists, but their to-do lists have no steps. They have no action, no script in place. A to-do list is like a bird's eye view of a topic, and even if you have just one item on your to-do list, you'll find that there is still a ton of detail that needs to be mapped out. So let's do that. Let's put one item on a to-do list. So what's our to-do list for today? The to-do list is to write an 800-word article for a newsletter. Okay, so we have the list, but where are the details? Let's list the details. We have to come up with the topic, we have to write the outline, we have to tidy up the outline, we have to find out the one thought and the one word for the article, we have to write the article, we have to add the connectors, we have to edit for typos and grammar, and then we have to re-edit for style. Now, when you map out something like that, what you've got is clear scripting. You know, for instance, that it's not a good idea to write an outline and the article in the very same hour. If you're an expert writer, you may pull it off, but even then it's not recommended. A good strategy is always to outline in advance, then go away, do something else. Let the content simmer in your brain. Then later in the day, maybe even next day, you write the article. And so now, not only do you have the steps involved, but also the strategy that you're going to follow. Most projects don't have intricate steps. Most projects run into trouble because there is no detailed planning. For detailed planning, you have to put everything down on paper. For example, if I'm writing a book, I have to list everything that's involved. So it's not just write a book, but you have to write down the detailed plans of everything that goes into a book, every step of the way. When I'm designing a course, again, extreme detail is involved. And most people never follow those intricate steps. And that's when they run into chaos. And all hell breaks loose. Suddenly all bets are off as things start to go haywire. Exhaustion soon follows, resistance pretty much shows up, and that's it. Now you don't have a plan in place. So how do you plan for chaos? That's the whole point of chaos, isn't it? It's unforeseen, but it's always consistent. It always shows up no matter how big or small the project. And incredible as it may sound, we never plan for it. And you can't plan for it. So what you do is just mark out time for chaos. That's all you can ever do. Expect that a third of your time is going to end up in chaos and plan accordingly. The script needs to be in place, and chaos needs to be part of that script. Because even if you do get exhausted, even if you do get bored, which you will, what you've done is factored in time. You factor in resources to deal with that chaos. And more importantly, instead of just a to-do list, you've got all of this detail under every project. Chaos is going to show up every single day. What I do is I mark out 3 hours in my day. Now, you know I have a very busy day. You know I do a lot of projects, podcasts, courses, workshops, all that stuff. Still, I'll keep 3 hours in the middle of the day completely free of everything. Nothing. And then I work everything around those 3 hours. So my to-do list is exclusive of those 3 hours, and you say, well, I don't have 3 hours. Well, no one has 3 hours in a day to just mark out just like that. And yet you have to mark out a few hours in the day and then put all the stuff that you have to do around those 3 hours. And that's how you get some time, some downtime, because resistance is going to show up anyway. And that brings us to the end of this episode. We'll cover resistance in another episode next time as well. So what did we cover in this episode? We covered 3 things. The first is, what is it? Is it really resistance or is it something else? And we found that it was exhaustion. First exhaustion. Exhaustion sets in. Tiredness, then exhaustion, and then resistance just comes over and we're easy peasy to just knock over. So if you don't have breaks every 25 minutes, if you don't have somewhat of a nap, 20 minutes even in the afternoon, if you don't have the weekend, if you don't have vacations, well, you're going to face resistance big time. That's going to happen whether you like it or not. So don't buy into this whole concept of, oh, we have to work all the time. No, it's work and vacation. Both of them are important. The second thing is why resistance detests groups. And resistance detests groups because groups help you. They help you go far. It's that African saying, if you want to go far, go with a group. Don't go alone. And most of us try to do this alone. We try to do everything alone. Like right now when I'm writing the notes for the article writing course, I'm not doing it alone. I'm doing it with a group. So I write the notes, I send it out to David. David comes back and says, hey, you've got to fix all this stuff. I send it out to Teresa. Teresa says, you've got to fix all this stuff. And what's happening is that when I get a little down, they will say, hey, you're doing a good job. Keep at it. I have a deadline. I have this deadline that I have to deliver next month. But even so, the group really helps me. And so don't work alone, work with a group. And finally, the third thing is chaos. And every single day is going to have chaos. Like this morning I woke up, I was going to speak to someone, and he's a guy I wanted to speak to for a long time. Well, he didn't respond until this morning, and now I've got to speak to him. That's 1.5 hours of my time. Where am I going to get 1.5 hours from? Well, I already have 3 hours that I've allocated in every day. And so 1.5 hours of that 3 hours is going to go to speak to that person who I've wanted to speak to for a very long time. And that's how you work out and how you beat resistance. Well, you can never beat resistance, but you can make a worthy opponent. So what's the one thing that you can do today? Well, it's much harder to find a group right away. So look at exhaustion and look at how you can just take a 20-minute nap. Maybe at your desk, just put your head down and go to sleep for 20 minutes. It doesn't make you groggy, not 20 minutes. But it lifts you up tremendously. So if there's one thing that you can do today, it's to take the breaks in your day. And you will find that will change the way you do things. So what's happening in Psychotactics land? As the days tick along, I start to move out of my complete sloth mode into something of semi-work, almost like a little build-up, a little rumble. And what I tend to do is I tend to watch some videos on software. So a lot of software that I haven't paid attention to through the year helps me as I go into a brand new year. And it helps me speed up things. And during the year, it's very easy to ignore it. But at this time, I'll go through entire pieces of software and I'll learn how to speed up things. So this year, I want to learn more about Audition, which is about audio editing. And there are some other little bits and pieces that I've been putting off for a while. that's what I'm going to be doing at this time of the year as I start to ramp up towards the 20th or so. Now, if you have been considering starting up this year with some support, but not this noisy, loud support that you get on Facebook, but this quiet, gentle, progressive support, then you should consider 5000 BC. And this is a good time to join 5000 BC because it takes 21 days for us to approve your stuff. And so you have to get on the waiting list. So get there, sign up for the waiting list, and then it'll take another 21 days, by which time I will be back in the cave, which is our forum, and in 5000 BC. So I will see you in 5000 BC. Go there, sign up for the waiting list, and we'll start up the new year together.